All right, so now I wanted to talk about a couple case studies. Again, we have people all around the world using this app, which I think is really one of the most exciting things about it is this big audience of people in all kinds of different places who are coming together to collect this data and create this bigger picture of plastic pollution through these, very hyper local efforts. So, it starts really small with people tracking in their own communities, but we're really building what I think is a really powerful global database. A couple examples of what we've used this app for. So we used it on an expedition with National Geographic along the Ganges River in 2019. So as part of that effort, we collected data on over 100,000 litter items. And we also got to work with schools and had them involved in collecting data. So this is a really great project to be able to do with kids. It's very accessible. We have people from middle school up to, really any age collecting this data. So it's really been a very big global effort. And we also developed education resources as part of the National Geographic project. So those are available on natgeo.org/debris tracker. And that includes this plastic pollution action journal, which if you do have kids in your life that you want to get involved with doing this, I would highly recommend that resource. It kind of walks through how to think about plastic like a scientist, and then also how to collect that data on plastic and use it to think about how we can develop solutions to this problem. And then our other case study that I wanted to mention is the Mississippi Project, which I want Jane to talk about a little bit more. But first, I'll just say, again, you just saw the data from that project, but one of the most exciting things with this citizen science approach is, instead of us as researchers going out and collecting this data, we've really just been encouraging people from the communities to collect this data. And we have over 80,000 items logged so far, which is a really impressive effort for, the amount of time. With the initial initiative lasted a month, and we were able to collect as much data as this entire year-long expedition along the Ganges River. So it's been a really amazing, impressive effort. And I'll let Jane from UNEP talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Catherine. So yeah, my name is Jane Eisenhart. I'm representing the United Nations Environment Program. And for those of you who don't know us, we are the leading agency within the UN system for addressing environmental challenges worldwide. I'm representing UNEP from our North America Regional Office, which is based in Washington, D.C., and we cover territory throughout the United States and Canada. So we started the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative with our partners a few years back, supporting a commitment made by mayors along the Mississippi River. So in September 2018, mayors from the river came together and announced this commitment with state legislators and companies on an effort to reduce plastic waste in the Mississippi River Valley by calling on government and organizations to reduce their plastic waste. So this commitment was born out of a need for a collaborative effort to tackle this huge challenge. And with cities across the country grappling with plastic waste, littering communities and waterways, we saw this as an opportunity to really take this problem head on. So because the Mississippi River is a drainage system for 40% of the continental US, plastic litter travels through storm drains and tributaries to the Mississippi River. As the river ebbs and flows, plastic waste is either left behind in our rivers, cities, or makes its way to the Gulf and to the ocean. So the Mississippi River City mayors knew they really needed to do something to take action. So that's where we came in, and this initiative was designed to address this problem. So UNEP's joined forces with MRCTI, which is the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, the University of Georgia Debris Tracker, and the National Geographic Society, along with local governments, organizations on the ground, and communities and educators to make this initiative a reality. The initiative kicked off with data collection, as Catherine mentioned, in 3 pilot cities along the river in early 2021. And these locations were Baton Rouge, Louisiana, St. Louis, Missouri, St. Paul, Minnesota, so representing the upper, middle, and lower river. The initiative is aimed at harnessing the power of ordinary people to become citizen scientists, like Catherine mentioned. So we're really mobilizing communities along the river to help us generate data and to create the plastic pollution map that we already shared here. But as I want to say, or what I want to say about this map is that it's really important because if we can't measure or assess the problem, we really can't tackle it. So we're hoping that this map helps to provide data on where plastic is along the river, where it's coming from, and giving us clues on how we can reduce it. So really inspiring action is the ultimate objective of this initiative. And this is important because plastic pollution is one of the most pressing environmental crises of our time. Plastic waste is slowly choking our oceans and our landscapes. Our oceans provide up to half of Earth's atmospheric oxygen. So if we suffocate the oceans, we're really suffocating ourselves. Yet every year, and we know that this is happening, but around 8 million tons of plastic enter the ocean each year. Most of this originates from land-based sources, including coastlines and major rivers like the Mississippi. The vast majority of this waste, about 80%, is comprised of products or packaging that we use once and throw away. So single-use plastics are a huge problem. And this is something we really need to get a grip on, and data is key in doing so. So globally, we have monitoring systems for oceans, but there's still very little data on the global monitoring for freshwaters and rivers. So that's where this initiative comes in. And we're hoping that this work that we're doing in the River Valley, gathering data of plastic along the river, will be part of a greater global monitoring system, which Catherine touched base on. So indeed, this will act as an early first starting point in partnership with local communities to call on ordinary citizen scientists to become data collectors, which is something that we're really proud of, really mobilizing and working with communities to address this problem. And we hope that this data will generate not only a plastic pollution map, but actionable information about plastic waste concentration in specific areas, which policymakers, businesses, and citizens can all use to take action together. So we wrapped up data collection in the spring. We're about to unveil the report results at a mayor's meeting this coming month. And we're hoping that those results will inspire mayors to take action along the Mississippi. And we're already hearing about commitments that are being deliberated in our initial pilot cities. So it really shows how this data does motivate and result in action-oriented solutions. So that's everything from me, Catherine. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer, but I know that Catherine's going to keep elaborating on the initiative some more.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, I mean, I think that this project in particular has been really kind of a model of what we would like to see with debris tracker data. You know, a really grassroots effort of having a lot of groups, a lot of boots on the ground, actually collecting data in their local communities, in the areas they know best, collecting that data and then being able to bring that not just to research here at UGA, but also to local action. And I think that's what's really powerful about this initiative and what's really exciting about it. And definitely a model we would like to see in other places as well. My last thing I'll mention is that it is our 10th anniversary of Debris Tracker this year. So we've been around for quite a while and are really excited to be able to support these kind of local data collection initiatives. And to be able to, you know, be a tool that people can use to collect this data, to share it globally, but also to, you know, really do this kind of advocacy work in a local grassroots way. So, you know, outside of the Mississippi Project, one of the most exciting things that we have going on is a wide variety of local organizations that are trying to collect data, that are, again, sharing it together in this global way that makes it more powerful, but then that are also taking this data back to, you know, local businesses, local policymakers in their own areas and being able to facilitate change in that way. I think having, you know, plastic pollution tends to be thought of as a far away issue, especially for communities in the US and especially for communities who aren't on the coast. And so I think being able to bring that data on plastic pollution really close to home and it to a local area is really powerful in terms of advocacy and facilitating change. Yeah. So I will wrap it up with that, but I'm happy to take any questions, as I'm sure Jane is as well. And if you're watching this later, there's our Twitter and Facebook handle is there at Debris Tracker. I'm definitely happy to answer any messages there. And we also have our Gmail address, debristracker101@gmail.com. So definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions. But I'll stop there and ask for questions now.
So I have a whole bunch of questions and I thought we could just do them one by one, but before I take any time, Kathy or Eric, do you have questions? I'd like to start with you.
I do. So I'm about 100 feet from the Mississippi right now where I'm working and our club isn't too far away. But we have like an adopt a highway and we have a mile of highway that we clean up twice a year. And we have one coming up for our Environmental Service Week. That's part of, we're going to schedule it during that week. So I'm very interested in how to track that data while we're picking up trash. We never pick up cigarette butts because there's so many that it's just kind of something like we'd be here forever. So I don't know if I would, I guess I would just like some advice on how to do that. I know you mentioned a few different ways, but just to kind of get people motivated to like, oh, we should track this because it's part of a bigger global effort, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple ideas. Definitely, again, the kind of gold standard is to have people tracking in pairs where they can pick up and collect at the same time. But again, that does take a lot more time. And I think a lot of times with people who are doing cleanups, it is a little bit difficult to get people as motivated and as excited about the data collection aspect as they are about the cleanup. It's nice to have the physical impact of how much stuff you're picking up. And I think that, the data tends to be a little bit further removed. If you can get people excited about it, which I think, is definitely possible, especially with this project being in the context of, we are very much actively trying to collect data to inspire local solutions. There's a lot of momentum along the Mississippi River right now, and that would certainly be very valuable data to have. So if you can get people on board with that doing the data collection in pairs where you really, make that as much of a priority as the cleanup, that is kind of the gold standard. But understanding that that's difficult and takes a lot of time. The other thing I would recommend is subsampling a particular section. So if you're not able to collect data for the whole time, or if the cleanup, the cleanup effort is over an entire mile, obviously that's a really big stretch. You could do a section for half an hour where you actually track everything. So that could be, one thing that you could space people out, have people for the first 30 minutes just walk and track, and then have people clean up for the rest of the time. That could be another way to kind of balance those competing interests, I guess, with data collection and with cleanup. But one of the things I like to emphasize a lot when you're actually out collecting data is that, cleanups are such an important and valuable way to do environmental service, but it is one of those things that you tend to, if you've ever done a cleanup before and then gone back, I'm sure with your highway, 6 months later, you see the same things there. You see, the same trash reappearing. So the data is really valuable in terms of being able to, describe that problem, but also hopefully implementing solutions or at least collecting some data that can help start thinking about solutions to reduce that problem, because we can do cleanups forever if we don't have data to inform why that's happening. Hopefully that helps a little bit answer your question.
Yeah, it does. And that's true, because the people that actually pick up the trash know what we're picking up, but we don't necessarily report that back or do anything with that information. My son is back home for a little while. He's kind of at a crossroads, but he has a degree in environmental and ecological biology. And, I think this would be very interesting to him. So if I could just go like, hey, let's go down by the river and do this. I mean, you can do it just as individuals, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Anybody can collect this data. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, do you have any questions before I go through the few I wrote down?
Not specifically, but I did. I think I kind of picked up on this a bit during the presentation. I am not particularly close to the Mississippi River, but I am on the shores of the Rock River, which is a fairly large tributary to the Mississippi. And so I was just wondering, kind of a scope-based question, were we to do something here on the Rock River, are you doing a fair amount of collecting on all of the, obviously the tributaries to Mississippi, like you said, covers probably half the country here. So I was just wondering kind of how big is the scope of the data you're collecting on this Mississippi project?
Yeah, so for Debris Tracker more generally, the scope is global. So we definitely want data collection anywhere people are willing to collect it. For the Mississippi project, we just started data collection in the spring. So our focus with the pilot cities thus far has been, cities right along the river, but we're definitely very interested in expanding more in the basin, and we're definitely very interested in data collection in the basin. So we've already had groups collecting data outside of the pilot city areas along the river and also in the broader basin. So that's definitely something that's really valuable in terms of data collection. You definitely don't just have to be right along the river to collect it, and especially along a major tributary. That's a really, valuable and neat data set to be able to collect as well.
Thanks for that question, Eric. We have a lot of our clubs that are located, a lot of great Wisconsin cities along the Rock River. It's a beautiful river, and it's connected into the heart of 6250. So that's good. So I'll just give you one question. Have you seen teams send trackers ahead of the cleanup people so that all you're doing is tracking, and maybe that's an efficient way to get that done? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, we did have some groups try that in the pilot cities, and I think it did work pretty well for them, because you can kind of pull the volunteers who are really motivated by the data collection, and then the people who are motivated by the cleaning up, and sort of separate those and kind of make it most efficient and most enjoyable for what the volunteers are looking for.
It seems like it would be. And not only that, but the people who are going to be doing tracking could practice in advance.
True. Yeah.
So they would get really good at tracking. It would become almost second nature. So, okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
It seems like you would have a preference for data on a riverbank cleanup, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, so we've really been trying with this initiative to get data not just from riverbank cleanup. So I think that's kind of been where people have been cleaning up historically, and we definitely want data from riverbank cleanups. It's certainly very valuable to know what's happening right along the river. But again, with getting back to this idea of tying what we're seeing in the environment into sources, we've also really been encouraging these more urban area cleanups, because then we're able to really, because again, the data is so geospatially granular, we're able to look at, what's influencing that plastic ending up on the ground in the community that ultimately is likely being washed or blown into some water system at some point, which probably, if it's in the basin, is making its way to the river eventually. So those urban cleanups have really been powerful in terms of, we're just really digging into the data now and starting to look at influencing factors and how that can inform solutions. But, things like access to public trash cans and public recycling, where the stores are located that are maybe selling these products in nearby areas, does the community have adequate access to waste management and those kind of services. So that data on more upstream things is also really valuable and very much complements the data that's collected right along the riverbanks as well.
So there's a third thing that is applicable to us in Wisconsin, and that would be a rural highway cleanup. And so it's not an urban cleanup, and it's not a waterway cleanup. So are you also interested in that?
Yeah, I'm kind of using urban in a sort of general way to mean where people are. So yeah, not necessarily within cities, but wherever you're seeing trash that is, close to the source of where it's, leaking into the environment. So definitely also certainly very interested in those kind of highway areas. That's a really interesting contrast to look at, what does it look like along a roadside in a more urban area in a bigger city versus what does it look like in a rural area where people are maybe throwing or dropping things out windows. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. When you were showing us the app live, there was something about a protocol and whether or not the collectors were following a protocol. Did you comment on that and I missed it, or is that something we need to know about?
Yeah, so for the Mississippi project, the transect method that I showed you of having, following a meter long transect for 30 minutes is the transect protocol for you guys. So we don't necessarily, you don't have to do it that way. But if you do it that way, it's valuable for us to know that you collected data in that way, just so that when we're actually analyzing and looking at that data, it's helpful to know how it was collected.
I see.
Yeah.
And then is there any benefit to knowing about where there's garbage but isn't picked up? In other words, could somebody be driving by or biking by and like, oh my God, look at all that garbage, and note it without picking it up? Or would you rather not even know that? Because that's probably duplicative, or I don't know. What do you respond to that?
Yeah, so for the Mississippi project, especially with COVID and with, not knowing what people's comfort levels with picking up trash, we did not require people to actually pick up the trash to record it. And that's our general kind of stance with Debris Tracker is you're welcome to record litter data without picking it up. It is one of the questions we ask at the survey at the end of whether or not you actually picked it up. So we can kind of ensure we're not being duplicative in that way by collecting that additional survey data on whether or not the trash was actually picked up. So again, obviously it's always great to be able to pick it up if you can, but some things aren't safe to remove. You might not have the right tools or equipment to be able to remove it. So we definitely, you can track without actually collecting the trash as well.
Okay. And then my last question is for Jane. How did the data compare to expectations?
I think the numbers kind of met our expectations, and the brands that were identified and the types of items that we found were really what we all assumed would be in the environment from our knowledge of what already exists in other places and through other reports, and even in past data collection efforts that the Debris Tracker team did. I think the surprising thing has been to see the enthusiasm in cities and from policymakers on what they want to do with that information, because the whole journey, they've been so supportive and so eager and so readily available. Every meeting we've organized, we've had involvement from all the pilot cities. They've been very responsive, and they've already started coming up with ideas, and we haven't even launched the final report yet with the results. And I think that exceeded our expectations. And we were in a meeting last Friday where they were already outlining some of the city actions that they're going to try to implement. And that was not shocking to hear, but a pleasant surprise to see that this is already creating change. So
good. It's really easy to imagine children that do the tracking with their parents, that being a lifelong change. I can easily imagine that. And I hope that we have a lot of families that do this together. Well, if there aren't any more questions or final comments, well, thank you for your generously sharing time with us, and for your commitment to helping our environment and your professions. We value you a lot and are grateful that you joined us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to share, and hope it was valuable. And definitely, if anybody is watching the recording later, feel free to contact us with any questions. Happy to help in that way as well.